XS Max, the iPhone XR, and then of course the iPhone XS, amongst other things. But in this video, the point is I actually want to make it very simple for you guys to decide which device to buy. There are so many and there's a lot of information out there, so I want to narrow it down to what's different and what actually matters when considering, between all these devices. So the iPhone XR is a cheaper version, but it might not necessarily be worth going down, saving $250, but sacrificing a lot of features. So that's why I want to bring it to light, talk about all those differences, even some that Apple didn't even mention at their event. And so if you're trying to decide between the XR, XS, or XS Max, hopefully with this video, it could help you decide between all of these. The first point I want to make is size, something not a lot of people consider before getting a new phone. The iPhone XS Max is absolutely huge. It's a massive display. You're going to get a lot more content visible there, but it is massive. It's basically a Plus series phone, but all display. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just do consider that it won't be as comfortable as, say, the iPhone XS or the iPhone XR edition. So the reach here, you don't have to reach as far in order to get into the control center, into that area. I would say it's definitely something to consider before going for one of these. The 6.1 does sit pretty well in between them, but still it is quite wide and you do have to stretch a bit just to get into the corners there. But otherwise, it's not an uncomfortable device. A lot of early reviewers are saying it's quite light for what it is. And something I wanted to mention about design, the iPhone XS and the XS Max both have asymmetrical speaker grills on the bottom. I don't know if it's something that's going to bother you. It does for me. Of course, I'm still getting it. I don't really care that much about it. But the iPhone XR is symmetrical. So their ports will be completely the same on both sides. The XS won't be. So very interesting design change. We don't know why they did that, but there is an antenna band in the place there. So it could be something to do with the modem setup or something like that. Okay, so let's start with displays, the thing that we're going to be interacting with the most on these devices. So obviously with the XS and the XS Max, you do have a couple different choices, smaller or larger. And with the iPhone XR, it goes smack dab in the middle at 6.1 inches. Size is size, that's your preference, but the technology behind the display is massively different. Here we've got, as Apple calls it, a liquid retina. This is a super retina. Now Apple's made some improvements to that, so the contrast ratio is better, the dynamic range is improved, so the display is really, really great. It supports HDR, this one does not, and the pixel density is a lot sharper. So it's got a 458 pixel density, this one has a 326, which is a 720p display, stretched across 6.1 inches. It's not going to be anywhere near as sharp as the XS models. So that for me is a big no. I would rather pay the extra $250 and get a much better display. This is the number one thing you're going to be interacting with on a daily. Just do remember that. But for some people, it really doesn't matter. It's all about your priorities. The one thing that sucks though about the iPhone XR is the amount of bezels on the side. And this clone right here is an actual representation of that amount of bezel. It's a lot. So they're chunkier than the XS or XS Max models. Just it's not going to look as sleek, I guess. And usually OLED does have better viewing angles, possibly less reflections. Brightness-wise, they're the same, but it's still going to be the best LCD ever made. It's just not as good as an organic LED display. Oh, and get this, Apple has completely removed 3D Touch from the iPhone XR, so no longer are you going to get that pressure-sensitive display. They've replaced it with something called the haptic touch, where if you hold something, it responds with a haptic movement using the Taptic engine. It's going to feel similar, but it won't be the same functionality. So if you guys use 3D Touch on a daily, if you love it, you won't be getting it on the XR, at least not in the same capacity. And materials. So the iPhone XR has an aluminum border, aluminum 7000 series to be exact. It's very durable, but not as durable as stainless steel. I mean, this is a solid metal. It's going to deform less during drops. In my experience, it's a lot harder to actually gouge and stuff like that, but it's not that big of a difference. They still feel very premium, glass and metal everywhere, basically. Durability wise, I believe these both have the world's strongest glass, as Apple said, and this one though is not as resistant in the water. It has an IP67 rating, whereas this one has an IP68 rating. That's 2 meters underwater for 30 minutes. This can only be 1 meter. So this is going to be a lot more resistant in pools. If you're going to be around water, salt water, Apple said they tested it in salt water. They almost encouraged you to be able to take it into the pool and use it in there with no worries. They said they tested it in wine and beer and everything. So if you're worried about that, if you possibly want to use your iPhone underwater, the XS models are going to be the one you want to go for. And colors. So the XS and XS Max, you have 3 selections, gold, silver, and space gray. On this one, you have way more colors to choose from. You got the white, the blue, the black, yellow, coral, and a real product red version, which actually looks really, really nice. So if you wanted that stylish look, have the option to choose between colors, the XR is the only one that really provides you with that. But the gold, Apple says, is probably their best looking color yet. Moving on to the cameras. So the cool thing about the iPhone XR is that it actually has the same camera as the iPhone XS models, the wide angle lens, but not the other one. So it's a single version of the dual lens camera. And that means you get very similar functionality, but not quite the same. You're missing optical zoom, the 2x zoom. Digital zoom only goes up to 5 times instead of 10 times on the XS. And you get 2 less portrait lighting effects versus the iPhone XS. It has a little bit more functionality there. Cool thing is though, it's the same aperture, same exact camera lens, just without the second one below it. So you're really not going to be missing out on much, but for low light, for zooming in on stuff, for video in general, this one will be a little bit better still. And the portrait lighting uses real depth instead of calculating it using digital algorithms, as Apple said. So overall, the camera will be better on the iPhone XS, but not greatly over the iPhone XR. And I'll have to test it, of course, in this channel. And something Apple didn't mention is that the iPhone XR has a lower class modem versus the XS. The XS will be capable of gigabit LTE downloads. This one stays at 600, so it doesn't have the newest modem technology. Okay, so as for physical differences, that's just about it between these models, the XR and XS. Between the XS and XS Max, I just wanted to point out, it mostly comes down to size preference. Do you want a smaller device or larger one? The difference between them is very, very minimal. It's just a little bit more battery life. You get an extra hour of battery life usage and a larger display. If you want to pay an extra $100 for that, be my guest if you want the larger size. But other than that, like in previous years, between the Plus and the non-Plus models, there used to be a lot of differences. Camera mainly, a screen. Now that is no longer the difference. It's just a larger display and a 1 hour longer battery life. So about the price, honestly, when Apple announced the pricing, I was like, wow, that's a bit steep. For the XS, it remains at $1,000 and the XS Max at $1,100 or $1,099, and the iPhone XR starts at $749. I think that's $50 to $100 overpriced of what it should be for what it offers, but at the same time, this thing shares so many similarities with the XS. It shares the same processor, the same internals mostly, as most of the camera and functionality in general has Face ID. The overall display is very, very similar looking, although it is an LCD, but Apple really loaded this thing up with most of what made the iPhone X great and improved upon it. So you're not really getting shortchanged, but at $750, honestly, I would have expected just a little bit more. I would have wanted this thing to start at $700. That seems a little more fair. And the iPhone XS Max maxes out at $1,449 without AppleCare, and AppleCare is actually rumored to get even more expensive because now it could cover theft or something like that. So this thing could potentially skirt with $2,000 prices fully loaded with tax and all that. That's ridiculous for a smartphone. But studies show that people are okay with spending $1,000 for smartphones, so Apple is really pushing that envelope. So the bottom line is that between the XS and XS Max, again, there's very little difference aside from $100 and the screen size. Between the XR and XS, there is a good amount of difference, but for $250, it just seems like it's a logical choice to upgrade to the XS. That $250 gets you a better display, better cameras, it gives you 3D touch, the display has thinner bezels going around it, it looks a little bit sleeker, you have that beautiful gold color option, whereas you can't get those colors if you do go to the XS from the XR. And if you wanted a 512 gigabyte storage option, which I don't know how many of you guys would because it carries a $450 premium over standard, but you can get that on the XS models, not here. This one only has 3 storage capacities up to 256 gigabytes. So if you were leaning towards the iPhone XR, the main advantages it has is that size, it's right in the middle between the XS Max and the XS. So it's a great happy medium. You're definitely getting more display than you would on a Plus series, and you do have all of those color options. Also, a weird thing, but I do like that the bottom is symmetrical. It's just a very complete, all-around great evolution from the iPhone 8 design. So it's going to be a winner. It doesn't have the best specs everywhere, but I love that Apple gave it most of all of the good things that the iPhone XS has, such as the processor, one of its cameras at least. I'm sure it has very great speakers on its own. They didn't really elaborate if it has the new ones from the XS or not. And hey, who doesn't like saving $250? For $250, you can do a lot with about that money, but for me, that 250 is better spent placing it into a 10s Max with all those great features. So that's my opinion. I personally would not get this thing, but if $250 makes that big of a difference for you and this checks all the boxes of what you wanted from an iPhone, certainly go for it. It's honestly very capable. It's a very good size. You get more screen and it costs less than the iPhone 8 Plus did when it was released. So not bad at all, honestly. Between these guys, I'm definitely going for the 10s Max, but whatever meets your needs is what you should go for. But hopefully this video helped make it a little bit more clear. They are more similar than they are different, but there are those key little things that really make the difference between these, mostly the display and the cameras. All right, guys, there it is. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I made your decision just a little bit easier. Peace.